1 second. You are now live.
Thank you.
Good morning. We will begin the June 18th meeting of the East Lansing Downtown Development Authority. I would ask staff to take the roll call, please.
I'll take the roll call. Peter Dewan,
Present.
Jim Croom,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens,
Here.
Peter Dewan. Dewan,
Pardon?
Peter Dewan.
You've already called me once.
Oh, I did. I'm sorry.
Just double checking.
Double checking. Greg Balline,
Here.
George Lahanas,
Here.
Jeff Smith,
Here.
Mike Kruger,
Here.
Luke Hackney,
Present.
and Lindsay Clayton.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. We have the agenda as presented by staff. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and ask for a second.
Luke Hackney, second.
It's been supported by Luke. All those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been adopted unanimously. We have the minutes of our June 11th meeting. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented by staff and ask for a second.
Luke Hackney, support.
Supported by Luke. All those in favor of the minutes of June 11th, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes are adopted. We have our financial report from May of 2020, the treasurer's report. Heather, are you going to discuss that?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
So business as usual, nothing out of the ordinary as far as this month. The only thing item I will point out is under our project development fund. This month we had expenses of $147,529, and that was due to the business relief program grants that we allocated. The DDA did at their May meeting. So you can see those expenses have gone through. And then let me see, going down a little bit further here. Just a few items for expenses for the Evergreen properties. So I'll take us down to our project development fund though itself. As you can see, we have reallocated $323,980 for the business relief program. And we have spent to date $147,500, leaving us a balance available of $176,480. This does not include the most recent allocations that the DDA approved, the additional 11. So that will be reduced by those 11 that were approved by the DDA at the June board meeting. So, but otherwise, we will see a payment come through in June, also 2 payments for our Grand River Sidewalk project. That is wrapping up. If you get a chance to get out, you might want to take a drive down Grand River in the 100 and 200 block and see how that project all came together. It looks really nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Are there questions of board members of staff on the treasurer's report?
Yeah, Luke Hackney. I just kind of missed that for a sec, Heather. So you're saying we have about 150,000 left then?
Yes, because you allocated an additional 11, and then then there will be you did allocate $20,000 also to the DMV for marketing, and so there will be some of that will come out of the marketing funds, and the small portion will come out of that business relief program also. But
So it's closer to like 1 to 4.
Yeah, you still have a substantial amount of money that you can use for business relief.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Luke. Any additional questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll move on. I wanted to let the public know that they have the opportunity to participate in our meeting today, as we have done for all of our electronic meetings. in order to make them efficient, we have adopted a rule pursuant to MCL 15.263 parens 1, which limits public comment at the meeting to 2 minutes per individual. We do that in an effort to make the online meetings efficient and allow people to speak if they wish to. So I will go ahead and make that motion to adopt the limiting the conversation to 2 minutes per individual and ask for a second.
Support, Jim Kern.
It's been supported by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Seeing none, okay. It's been adopted. Do we have any written communications, Heather?
No, we do not.
Okay. And at this time, we will move to opening up comments from the public. Is there anyone wishing to address the DDA?
Yep, there is one caller, caller ending in 963. I'm going to unmute you and you have 2 minutes to speak. If you choose not to speak, you can just say pass. You are now unmuted. Caller ending in 963.
Pass. Thanks, Heather.
Yep. Okay, that was it, Peter.
No comment?
No comment, they passed.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to our business agenda item, which is 5.1 legal representation. I know staff has produced an RFP, and who will lead this conversation?
That will be Tom Fehrenbach.
Welcome, Tom.
So, thank you. Yeah. So essentially, based on our conversation at the last meeting, staff went ahead and drafted this RFP. We did receive some comments back and some feedback from Mr. Kroom. And I would ask Mr. Kroom maybe if he could speak to his updates that he drafted and sent to staff. Essentially, this is I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Are you as well? Can you hear me as well?
Yep, we can hear you.
There's a lot of feedback. Maybe people aren't muted. If everyone can mute, maybe besides Tom.
Thank you. Yep, much better. So essentially what we tried to do here is, synthesize the conversation into an RFP that we can put out to the street for supplemental legal counsel specific to helping with drafting legal documents and advising the DDA on matters, real estate and other matters. So it's here for your consideration. If you'd like to make modifications, we'd be happy to hear that. And we think that if you do desire to put this out, we can do so in short order.
Tom, I have a question. As I reviewed this, it appears on the last page we've left a couple blanks spots to indicate when we expect this to be received back. What is the staff's recommendation as far as the release and then allowing adequate time for firms to participate and respond to the RFP?
So I think we can be prepared to release it as early next week. And I would, at a minimum, give a 2-week timeline for responses. Probably a sweet spot would be about 3 weeks, given we do understand there's some urgency related to this regarding, nascent agreements that are expected to occur.
And a follow-up question. So when you release an RFP, in what distribution channels does that go, and how are firms aware of the RFP?
So we would endeavor to try to get contact info for as many firms in the greater Lansing area as possible and send this directly to them. We would also put out a press release and probably make a posting on the city's website as well, with a link that can be clicked on.
Okay. So we need to fill in some dates as far as when we expect this RFP to be completed and returned.
You can do that, or you can, direct staff within some parameters, as soon as possible, with a X, number of weeks time frame, like you have in previous RFPs. I don't think you need to be exact in this unless you desire to do so.
Well, I'm just trying to think through as far as allowing adequate time for potential firms to respond, and then receiving those back within a certain period of time, and allowing the DDA to then make subsequent conversation or take action on any responses we receive. And I want to get a handle on what that time frame looks like.
Well, it's at your discretion, and some of the factors for your consideration are how you want to review the submissions. We have drafted this in a way that really gives the DDA very broad discretion. There's not, for instance, a review criteria matrix, and that could be something that you would prefer to have. And you could, discuss that today, give staff direction on how you might want to go about scoring applications, or you can leave it like it is now, which is, giving the DDA broad discretion. You could decide to have a subcommittee of the DDA created to review the submissions, or you could bring it to the full board to have them review all the submissions. There's really quite a few avenues you can go down, and it's really at your discretion.
Okay. Open it up to other board members that may have questions of staff or amendments to the RFP. And Heather, I can't see everyone. Could you maybe take the RFP off the screen? Thank you. Jim Kroom?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Hey, I should speak first. I had a question for staff first. In paragraph 2, the RFP indicates, and first, I really appreciate this draft. It's I think succinct and just sort of garners the information that we'll need to make a decision. The second part of paragraph 2 says that the lawyers need to practice law and maintain an office in the greater East Lansing area. Is there a ordinance reason or policy reason to limit it? I thought we would just go out to the whole state of Michigan, because there may be a large firm with real estate expertise that just happens not to have an office in Lansing proper, but does service the area. They could have a Troy office or Farmington.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some logic?
You could certainly pick anyone in the state of Michigan. I think our thought was we didn't think that the DDA would want to pay for travel expenses, but that's pretty much the only logic there.
Yeah, my comment would be, thank you, would be that we're doing a lot of this by Zoom now, and were they to need to personally come to a meeting, it might be 1 or 2 meetings. I wouldn't imagine personally that would be that significant, but it's good to keep those costs in mind. I think a more primary goal is to have someone that has the appropriate level of expertise. We heard on the call with Caddis that they've retained Honigman Miller. They do have an office in Lansing, but their lawyer is resident in Kalamazoo office and is a real estate expert. And I believe they also bring someone in from their Chicago office to help. So you can see that they'll be well represented. So I would propose then, and I had a couple more changes. Should I do those now? And it was just really to focus us that we're looking just for real estate expertise. And so I would propose that in paragraph 2 that it simply be limited to someone practicing and licensed in the state of Michigan.
I accept that change. If you have other changes, Jim, why don't we go through all of them, and then we can perhaps have conversations and adopt them en masse, if that's all right.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be critical. And again, they're just to put a finer point on things. At the end of paragraph 1, I would just insert primarily on real estate development and transactional matters. And I believe staff has my written comments, so I'll move quickly. So it would say to supplement the services provided by the East Lansing City Attorney, primarily on real estate development and transactional matters. And then in paragraph 3, second clause, and is likely to be negotiating I would insert land sale agreement, comma, a development agreement and related agreements in the near future. And then in scope of services, first bullet point, middle of page 1, review, draft, and negotiate. Then I would insert real estate and development and related transactional documents. So those would be my changes. And you can see they just more or less focus that we're looking for real estate expertise, somebody that does this, every day, all day.
So, Jim, I think those are all great suggestions. And I guess as a matter of formality, why don't we just go ahead and formally adopt the changes by a vote of the DDA? So
I'll make a second on those changes.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the changes that Jim proposed, say aye.
Aye.
Right?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll make all those changes accordingly. Does anyone else wish to speak to the RFP or comments? George?
Should we do a motion to approve before discussion?
Oh,
I thought
sure.
we just did.
It's already, isn't there? I thought it was already on the floor for discussion, but maybe, did we put the whole
Oh.
thing? forward?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I can wait for a motion or just make a motion to approve, but I want to make a comment about it before voting, so.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I just want to be clear that I'm supportive of this if what I'm reading it's intended for is for specific review of development agreements, sale, like the actual real estate transaction, but still using the city attorney for the day-to-day regular attendance at meetings, regular questions. And I think that's what this intends, but I could support that, but I wouldn't support broadly having a second attorney, because I think in terms of cost efficiency and all of that, I don't think it's nearly as good as using our city attorney. But so is that what we're intending, that this is really for very specialized review of legal documents and transactions related to real estate and having a second review, but not for the general work of the DDA?
I can give you my concept. It would be, I think, consistent with what you're saying. This attorney would be specifically retained by the DDA, so their duty of representation would be to the DDA and not, for instance, City Council. So two different corporate entities. So to the extent the DDA may need advice separately from what City Council wants to do, we would receive that. But on a larger scale, I would think that they would work with Tom Yaden to draft any documents together using their expertise. He already has templates from past deals. They can scrub those, which will be good starting points. They can add items that may have been overlooked. And if there were ever to be a conflict between, say, council, a legal conflict between council and DDA, this lawyer could advise on that, or this law firm could advise on that. But yeah, primarily maybe riding along in negotiations and drafting, George.
Okay.
This is Jeff, real quick. How do we resolve conflict between the two legal opinions? Maybe there is a situation where the DDA's best interest is not necessarily in line with the council's best interest. How do we resolve that?
Yeah, that's if that were to come up, which it could come up in really any interaction between DDA and council. It typically does not arise. In this set of circumstances, if I recall history, there were times when DDA may have been of the opinion, gee, since council approves any development project, ultimately, we're really hamstrung, we can do some of the, initial work and have our opinions and have them carried to council as any other commission does, or body that sits next to or beneath council, but that they would have the ultimate decision on development agreement. The question is good in terms of the land sale. I believe the property is owned by the DDA. And could there arise a conflict where over price, or let's say the structure of price, we heard comments yesterday or the day before that, well, maybe we wouldn't just pay cash of whatever the bond balance is. We would structure it through maybe a TIF or something like that. And so we would need to think about that. So there may be a case where DDA was in favor of selling the property on particular terms and council differed, but that would be resolved by a vote of DDA and advice from Tom and this lawyer about how to get on the same page, I guess. Ultimately, everything is decided by both those bodies voting. Don't know if that answered it.
We just have to be comfortable with the idea that there may be a situation, and more so now than in the past, where the voting of the two entities still doesn't resolve the conflict, and that there is a secondary, I'm not sure how we're going to pull it together, but there will be a situation where the two entities just disagree on the approach, and have legal representation to support both sides' arguments. So we're going to have to be comfortable with that when it arises.
Yeah, and I think if I can react, there are many municipalities and DDAs who have separate counsel in the state of Michigan. Many, I don't know if that's a characterization. There are some that I know of that routinely do this.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions? So we have we have adopted the changes that Jim had proposed. Back to the main motion, is there a intent to adopt the RFP as been amended?
Hey, Chair.
Yes, Aaron.
Hey, Heather, could you just maybe verify and clarify who made the original motion and who made the second?
Heather, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Oh, my bad.
I don't show original motion for this. It started out with Jim's discussion. He had some comments.
Okay.
Not that.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. I agree. We need a motion, so I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
It's been moved and supported. Aaron, you want to speak to the motion?
So I just as a point of procedure, I think that then that amendment that we made would have been moot because we didn't actually have a motion originally. So I will make a motion to amend this RFP based on the edits that Jim Kroom had indicated earlier in the meeting. Is that sufficient based on what's happened? All right, I'm getting I'm getting a nod from Tom, so I'll make that motion.
I'll support Luke Hackney.
Okay.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Stevens and supported by Luke to adopt the changes offered by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
All right. Thanks. And then, yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that we were all above board on that. So.
Yes, Luke?
I just want to get a little clear idea of the timetable and what maybe a reasonable timetable is for this. If the city staff's just filling in the gaps, I want to know that it's like sooner than later.
So again, we would, you can be as specific as you want to with that, but left to our own devices, we would be issuing it early next week. and probably put a 3-week time frame in terms of the responses to give folks, some time, but obviously try to limit that. We could potentially whittle that down to 2 weeks. I think that 3 weeks is probably more appropriate personally, but that's just one staff member. And then once we receive the responses, we still have the open issue of how the DDA would want to go about reviewing them. Would you want staff to review them and provide sort of a summary? And if so, would you want that summary to come to the board, or would you want it to come to some other subcommittee or other task force?
Thank you. To me, that timetable sounds reasonable. Next week sounds reasonable. 3 weeks sounds reasonable. Personally, I would love to review all of them. I don't want to leave this to staff to make decisions on our behalf or give us a simple overview.
Tom, once the RFP has been closed and we receive responses, we can schedule a meeting as necessary for the full DDA to review the submissions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That would be my preference. I presume that's what others' opinions are as well.
Yes.
Excuse me, Peter.
Yes, Lindsay?
I think it would be important that for us to schedule that meeting right now. We know if we have a date when when we're gonna have them in by, I would like for us to have a scheduled meeting today or, in the next couple of days so that we can be really on top of this. But I would also be comfortable with the exec and finance reviewing this if people don't want the whole board doing it.
So just to chime in there, if we released it next week and put 3 weeks plus a day or so to have it due on a Friday, that would be due on the 17th. Your next regular scheduled meeting for July would be the 23rd. So it would coincide with your normal meeting schedule if you wanted to just do it that way.
That works for me.
Yeah, I think that's an acceptable timeframe. Lindsay, did you have a follow-up comment?
When does executive and finance meet? Do they meet that Thursday before the Friday deadline? Okay. I really would prefer that exec and finance review them, and then maybe we'd be ready for a vote for that following meeting on the Thursday. So I don't know if
so what? Yeah.
Maybe
so why don't we have them be due the 15th then?
Is that Wednesday?
And then that's the day before. Yes, and
Yes,
that'd be the day before the exec and finance, so we could post it that night and have it ready. We could have it due like 3 p.m. that day, so that gives us time to post it.
Is that enough time for staff to get the packets together and things like that for exec and finance?
We can have all the packets already ready to go and put out, and then essentially just add this to it.
Fantastic. Okay, then I look forward to seeing that at our next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you. Aaron?
Thank you. Aaron Stevens?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to increasing the timeline or moving this. I understand the pertinence of it. I just want to point out that then the exec and finance committee would be making that decision based on, or be making suggestions to the DDA based on, like I guess a day of overview of this. I just want to be cognizant that these are, we might receive a good amount of responses, and I think, giving a little bit of time to review and get questions answered and stuff might be pertinent. So I think, at least for other members of the exec and finance committee, maybe being open to the idea of scheduling I'm not saying we have to do this right now, but scheduling another meeting before the regular DDA meeting. I apologize, staff, in advance, but I want to be cognizant that that would be a day, and then we would be discussing and moving forward with suggestions to the full DDA. So I want to be, yeah.
Just from a staff perspective, I think that I guess how we would envision that session is more as a work session to review the documents as an exec and finance committee, ferret out any of the the
Okay,
relevant
okay. No,
information
that-
and
all
then
right.
prepare it for discussion at the full DDA.
Okay,
But, we're
understood.
certainly open to another meeting.
No. That makes complete sense to me. All right, I'm good.
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, so can we make a motion to I just want these dates actually in the RFP. So I'll make a motion to include the dates given by Mr. Fairbach into the RFP.
I'll support your motion. Luke, any further discussion?
So just as a clarification, we're saying 3 weeks, and what is the date of the due date? At this point.
It would be July 15th.
Okay.
So we'll do our best to get it out early next week. So if you can give me a little bit of flexibility there, I think, we'll probably shoot for the 24th.
I just like the July 15th date.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion to add those dates into the RFP. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing none, that has been adopted. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion?
Peter, Greg Ballline.
Yes, Greg.
Just had a curiosity question. I watched earlier this week the Evergreens committee, the stakeholders committee, and is that going to be, what is the plan going forward with that? Is that kind of a one more meeting thing?
Well, that group still remains intact and will still be meeting. We don't have a date scheduled. As the planning process evolves, likely that committee will reconvene when there's more information for them to evaluate. I don't know if that's sufficient to your question, Greg, but that's where things
Well, no,
are.
I guess more to the question is there a timeline that's been set for resolution of this meeting set? Is it one more discussion meeting and then a recommendation to DDA? I don't pretend to know how that's supposed to work.
Yeah, I anticipate that body will clearly meet minimally one, perhaps 2 additional times as needed.
Okay, one of the reasons why I bring this up is because obviously, there's deadlines that need to be met as far as acceptance of the proposals and things. And without a clear timeline for fruition of this committee to meet and provide their guidance for the DDA, I'm wondering if I know we're going to have counsel. I don't disagree with that. It just would be nice to have a clearer timeline of expectations and how that affects the proposals that have come in with River Caddis, and how their ticking deadlines are going to affect the DDA, and are we going to have special meetings to extend? And I was kind of concerned when we did this would extend out through the end of summer and maybe into September. And I'm hoping that's not the case. Is there, I know you're the chair of it. Is there any way you can provide some, at least rough estimate of when you think that committee will come to a conclusion in its opinions?
Can I jump in a second?
Surely.
Yeah, so I thought that the point of that committee was to be available over time so that as the developer formalizes their view, they have a group to bounce things off of stakeholders. So I don't necessarily see that existing as long as there's a development project that's still being discussed, so we can talk to all the people at the People's Church and have all those stakeholders present. So I didn't necessarily think that there was an end point where we're trying to get to a date from them, but rather that they're available to respond to hear from the project people and then give feedback.
Well, I guess my larger concern is that we're going to have to come to a point where the DDA formally makes a decision on this. And with an open-ended committee like that, if there is no decision, when does that stop?
Well, we want to get to a project that can be approved by us, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the goal. But I'm trying to figure out a timeline for this occurring, because I just can see this dragging out for months and months and months, and us continuing to have special meetings to extend deadlines as we've done on previous projects. I'd like to see this come to a fruition sooner rather than later. So that's
Sure.
why I'm trying to get us nailed down on a timeline rather than leaving it open-ended, whenever we get to it.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I respect the conversation that's happening, and I understand its importance. I don't understand the relation to the agenda item that's being voted on currently, I suppose.
Fair enough.
What might this be a conversation for the comments from board members at the end of the agenda?
I'll be happy to continue the conversation at that point.
Well, all right. Let's, before our meeting concludes today, let's continue that conversation. But there is a motion to approve the RFP has been amended. If there's any additional comments about that motion, we can take them now. If not, we'll go ahead and vote. Seeing none, all those in favor of the amended RFP, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? So the RFP has been adopted. Let's go right into comments from board members. So Greg, as George had indicated, this committee serves in an advisory capacity to the DDA. There is not a set timetable as far as their input. Meetings will be scheduled with this body as plans materialize, and the developer still is evaluating a whole host of different issues. We had an introductory meeting with some conceptual ideas. There were stakeholders offered their opinions and ideas relative to that vision that the developer proposed. But again, it's important to understand that that body is a representative list of stakeholders in our community and will serve in at our direction. And ultimately, any decisions made are clearly going to be the DDA's. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens, you had a comment?
Yeah, back to, I think, Greg's discussion. I have a feeling, and this might be misguided, but that the holdup on timeline is not necessarily on the city side. I think, whether the developer, and based on initial contact, wanted to get community input on what the project should look like, that it seems to be on the developer to be giving us something concrete as to what the project is going to look like. So I think setting a timeline might be good, but it more might be setting a timeline for other folks, not necessarily the group itself, to come up with a recommendation.
Jim?
Yeah, one of my takeaways from the last meeting, or the Evergreen Properties meeting, was that the developer is in need of getting some anchor tenants or tenants lined up, and that there are precursor steps to that in the developer's mind. So I would think that staff would continue to work with the developer and move this along so that the developer can undertake whatever it thinks it needs to do to get those commitments that it needs. And then at any point, if the DDA believes that things are moving too slowly or not acceptably in any way, we just need to have a meeting and we just eliminate exclusivity and start over. So That's
I,
what.
I would second what Jim Croom just said. And I fully support that notion.
I
Okay,
agree with what everybody said already. I don't disagree with anything anybody said, but it's kind of like we set clear guidelines for progress of work, and the developers under those guidelines, we're now setting guidelines for dates, for legal representation for this. It seems kind of short-sighted of us to leave it open-ended and say, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this. I don't disagree with getting it right. It's too important to our community not to get this right. We need public input. We need the stakeholders' take on things. But to not have a meeting schedule that makes that progress forward is kind of short-sighted.
are there other?
If I may, Chair,
Yeah.
I just want to remind the DDA that you currently have an exclusivity that ends on July 24th. And you have a meeting scheduled, your regular meeting in July for the 23rd, where this will appropriately be certainly part of the expected agenda items to discuss, the future of this project and potentially timelines as well.
Thank you, Tom. Are there other comments? Any other items anyone wishes to address? Okay, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Support.
Second.
Support.
By Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks for everyone's time.